What's going on, everybody? I'm Patrick from POWLAX, and this is our final building box picks video where we'll be covering the 4V up pick and cycle. So we've already done videos on the 2V series, 3V series, and 4V series. The only other one we hit up picks in was the 2V series. Also in this video, we're going to be glossing over some of the picking strategy and technique. We're kind of just going to see the looks and kind of see how we're going to build within our 4V series. But so if you'd like to get more of a background on how to use and defend box picks, check out the using and defending box picks video, which I'll link right up here. Finally, if you'd like to download the drill PDF that corresponds to this video, you can get that at patreon.com/POWLAX. It'll be a part of the $1 per month tier, and I'll put a link right up here in the corner as well as in the description for Facebook. So as we move through this video, we're going to do it in the same fashion that we did the 2V, 3V, and other 4V video. But so basically, we are going to use 4VOs to get the idea of how the offense should work as far as what we are trying to do with emotion so that players know where to be, know what to do. Then we're going to add in 3 defensemen where the offense will always have an open look. Therefore, they'll be able to see the looks that should happen within the 4V set. They're just going to have to pick a little better within the 4V set. Also in our 4v3s, the defense is not going to be using proper pick defense because rather than having 2 players at the ball and splitting one backside, we're going to have 1 player in the pick and the other 2 will be backside, and our focus is going to be more on rotating than defending the actual pick. Finally, we'll move into our 4v set, and here the offense is going to have to make their picks work really well if they're going to draw the switches, and our defense will have the actual components of pick defense with switching, trying to get through, things like that, because we'll have 2 players to the ball. So the first thing that we're going to cover is our 4VO, and basically what we're doing here is we're going to have these 4 players run the offense with no defense for a good amount of time, maybe 15 seconds, and then we're going to allow them to shoot. And as they shoot, we're going to want them to find something like a pretty look that uses more than just one pass, and definitely isn't just someone coming off of a pick and shooting. So they at least have to hit the slip. So as we're going through our motion, we're always going to begin with a pass. So L1 is going to pass to R1, and one of our rules within this set is if the ball is passed across, we are always going to cut the middle and set up on the back pipe. We'd really like to have a player on the back pipe here all the time, strictly because if you can get a skip pass through to it, you've got an easy shot and the goalie will have to move. As L1 is cutting the middle, L2 is going to cycle to the top. And so this is what we mean with our cycle. Now, after the pass comes over, R2, who was on the backside pipe because the ball is on the opposite side, he is going to come inside out and set an up pick for R1. R1 is going to kind of drag towards the pick, use a face dodge or spin move to come off of the pick, and R2 is going to slip to the goal. As he is doing this, we'd like for R1 to throw a fake towards the slip to make sure that we're getting in the habit of always seeing if the slip is open. Now, from this point, we've got 2 ways we can move the ball to the other side. We can wide turn away, which is basically R1 having not gotten in, will wide turn away or question mark, and then he will pass the ball across to L2. The next thing that we can do is we can repick. So as R1 is coming down the floor, let's say he gets a little bit deeper, now R2 having just slipped, if nothing's there on the slip, he can come right back out and he can set a pick for R1 to roll over the top of it. And so as you're doing this, you can basically do it in either way you want. If you're just running this for the first time, I think it's beneficial to have them just try to roll away so that the slipping player really has to utilize his slip well. But once you get used to that, you can absolutely have them repick. And so once again, as he comes over, he is going to move the ball across the floor to L2. Also, forgot to mention it before we got to here, but as R2 sets this down pick, he's always going to slip to the goal. It's the same series as our down pick series. I just forgot to mention that he's got to slip after he sets the down pick. So now, R1, having just thrown the ball across, he has to cut the middle, and we need to cycle backside. So he's going to cut the middle to the back pipe. R2 is going to cycle to the top of the floor. And the whole idea of cycling after you move the ball is just, after we pass the ball, we always want to cut. We always want to be active. And so a lot of offenses actually don't even really include mandatory picks. They're a lot more freelance, but they have to include some element of off-ball movement. And one of the easiest ways to get kids to do it is to have them cut after a pass. So the pass came across to L2. Now we're gonna get our up pick on this side. L1 comes inside out, sets the pick for L2. L2 drags, does a face dodge, spin move right around this pick, tries to come to the goal. L1 is going to slip to the goal. And now if we want to, we can have them come in and set their repick. So L2 will roll back over the top, L1 will slip, and then he'll move it across to R2. After the players have repped this out maybe 2 times on each side, we'll say, okay, you're clear to shoot. And some of the looks that we definitely want to find are the player slipping. This slip from an up pick is probably my favorite type of pick. It usually leaves the player open, and it's worked a lot better for us within our practices than the down picks have. Another look that we might be able to find is a pass through to the back pipe, even some give and go action. But the key is to have the players find the looks that they'll have in their 4v3s. In this clip, we were using our 4v3s rather than our 4v0 to walk through the concepts of how we want to run our up picks. We were also running our up pick to down pick series rather than just our up picks. But if you want to run up picks, you can absolutely just run them and have the players wide turn away or question mark to make the pass across. So the righties start out with their up pick. The lefties on the backside are cycling. We get an up pick, a slip, a down pick, a slip, pass across. Now we're getting an up pick on the lefty side, a cycle on the righty side, get our up pick. Now we get our down pick, the ball goes back across, and now we repeat the motion on the righty's side of the floor. Once our players have a good understanding of how the motion works, we're gonna move into our 4v3 and 4v4 series where they're gonna get to play live and actually have defenders, things like that. But so a couple of the ways that we can do that is we can always have lines up top that come in and out of the drill. You can drop all 7 new players in. If you do that, I recommend that each rep have at least 3 contests where if the defense clears the ball twice, they win, and if the offense scores twice, they win, to add a little competition. And it really adds a good element for understanding to the players, because if they're just going in, doing 1 rep and then leaving, it's just too quick. You want to allow the players to experience what it's like to play live at least 3 times in a row so that they can get the understanding and they're not just playing, pausing, playing, pausing. They get 3 separate reps to kind of see what the differences may be depending on what happens in quick succession. Another way that you can run the players through the drill is to alternate how they enter the drill so that they're separate colors and move them from offense to defense to out of the drill. So in our 4v3 drill, L1, L2, R1, and R2 will all be offense the first rep. Then whoever touches it last will leave the drill, and then the other 3 will end up playing defense on the next rep as the other players come through. Once we get into 4v4s, now we can play fireball, which is basically a coach will throw it anywhere on the floor. Whichever team picks the ball up, gets it back to coach, they're on offense. And then if there's a turnover, that team has to pick it up, move it to coach, and get it back. Then they'll be on offense and they'll switch. The final way that you can run the drill, and I haven't talked about this in the former videos, but you can also set up offensive and defensive lines in all the corners and then throw a ball into the drill and have all of the players play it out from a non-structured starting point. I really like that for more of a freelance feel. And so if you're only gonna have 3 of the defensemen go, whichever line you throw to, the adjacents and the line you threw to will enter the drill, and now they'll have to recover in, match up, and then the offense will play out and they'll defend. So now we're gonna move into our 4v3s and go over all of the stuff that can happen within a specific pick. And so this isn't something where you're going to want to stop play and make kids see each thing. This is just some of the elements for your knowledge that you may be able to let some of the players know, but all of the things that we cover can happen on this side, they can happen on that side, and they're gonna happen in very quick succession. It's not like we're going to pause it and play through it. But as we go through this, we're gonna outline everything that happens before a pick and then go over all of the things that could happen after the pick. So as you look at our set, we've got our 2 lefties, L1 and L2. We've got our 2 righties, R1 and R2. R2 is here for this back pipe look. And then for the defense, we've got D1 who's ball, D5 who's right, D6 who's left. D5 is covering R1 and R2. It's really important that he's in this skip lane to begin the drill, or else you're going to want him down here. And then D6 is splitting L2 and R2. So as we begin, L1 is going to pass the ball across to R1, and he is going to cut the middle. And as he cuts the middle, D1 is going to stay with him, and these two players can kind of push against each other. You really want to embrace that contact if you're playing in a league that allows it, which most box leagues should. So now L2 is going to be coming to the top of the floor on his cycle, and we're going to pick on this side. So D5 is going to head out to play the ball, and R1 is going to drag his man, waiting for R2 to come up and set his pick. So as R2 comes inside out, he's going to set his pick on D5, and as D5 is coming up to play him and D6 sees that a pick is coming, D6 is going to follow R2, but he's not going to actually get inside of the pick. He's going to let D5 know that the pick is coming by saying pick coming right, but he's not going to actually be involved in the pick. He's basically going to split whatever happens with the pick, whoever becomes open, with the backside player, which will be L2 and L1. But so he's not actually in the pick. We're going to focus a lot more on rotating rather than the actual pick defense, which we'll get to in our 4v series. So once we're to our pick, we've got R2 setting a pick on D5, D6 is in here watching whatever happens with the pick, D1 is backside covering up for L1 and R2, and now we're going to go through all the defensive looks first. So as R1 comes off of this pick, what we'd like to have happen is we'd like for D5 to get through the pick so that once we get to the 4v4s, if we can get through those picks, they won't have any advantage. And now as this happens, R2 is going to slip to the goal, and so D5 will simply cover R1, and D6 will be splitting R2 and will eventually pick up R2 if the ball is passed to him. As the ball is passed across the floor, we get a good example of how a defenseman can get under the pick to stay with the ball carrier. Also, we see how our backside player who just got in is watching the pick and will pick up the player who is slipping. The next thing that can happen is the pick can work. And so as R1 comes off of this pick, if this pick is set very well and D5 cannot get through, now we're going to see the first elements of how we're going to have to rotate. And this is a rotation that would happen if there were two players on this pick, if he got around the switch. So if you can imagine it, we'd have another player in here who'd miss R1. And so as he comes off of the pick, D5 is going to want to switch to get back under R2, and D6 is going to rotate out to R1. Here we get a good example of a switch. Within our 4v3s, we'd actually rather have the player who is coming to the pick with the picker stay inside a little bit further and react to what happens with the pick, rather than having it look like a traditional switch like it does here. So now we're going to cover how the players are going to rotate. And the key to this is to understand that we are definitely going to have a player who is inside here watching. So in the previous version, it was D6 because he got through the pick. But in this one, it's going to be D5 because he's recovering. And he's going to be the player that's going to have to get out to defend the other side like D6 is here. So we'll go through this example. Let's say R1 continues his carry down. He wide turns away. R2 would have slipped to the goal, which is going to bring D5 with him to the goal. And now, as the ball is passed across the floor, D1, who is splitting this side but defending L1 because he's more dangerous, is going to step up. And then let's say we do have another up pick here. We get a drag. He comes off of it. D5 is going to be the player who has to stay inside and end up coming to the player coming off the pick or defend the slip. And D6, who was defending this ball here, he's going to be the player who has to get inside and defend the backside pipe. And so the players are going to have to rotate a lot more than they will in the 4v series, but it's good to have them always reading and reacting. It kind of puts them in chaos mode so that they're ready to read and react when an advantage does happen. So in this clip, we get a pass across, we see the defenders rotate, we get an up pick and a good slip, we try to recover to the slipper, we get a down pick, and now we see how the players are going to rotate. We get another up pick on the other side, and now we have to slide over with our player who was watching the pick. Now we get another down pick, and because we have to switch it and the ball moves early, the player who switched to the ball is actually the player who rotates over, which is unlike the previous example. So really, we just want to make sure that our players are reading and reacting. Whoever is closest will be rotating to the opposite side. So the final thing that can happen defensively that we may want to see here is basically if this pick works well and R1 comes off of it, and now D6 ends up missing, and so R1 continues to get in, we may need to slide with D1, and we really don't ever want to do that, because if we're in our 4v set, that means our switch didn't work, our first slide didn't work, and now we're hitting our second slide. So we really never want that to happen. The other thing that can happen to force D1 to rotate is if the pick works really well and he slips to the goal, and now he is ball side of D5, which is actually what we want. With D6 pressing out to play R1, now if D5's trailing R2 and the pass comes in to R2, now we have to rotate up with D1. And so this is really going to help our players understand that they need to be sideways backside defending their man, but also being in. If players can play 4v4 with a 4v3 mindset, they're going to be much, much better players. Now that we understand the defensive side of the ball, we're going to go over the offensive side. And so as we see this pick, the goal of any pick is to get ourselves open, being the picker, or to get our teammate open, being the guy who's coming off of the pick. And because we are 4v3 and we only have one player to the pick, we're always going to have somebody open after this pick happens. And we'd like to get two players open because we'd like the pick to work, and we'd like the picking player to be goal side, so that not only is the player coming off the pick open, but the player who's slipping is open. But so let's say we come off of this pick, but the defenseman stays with us. Now R2 is going to be open as he slips to the goal. Problem is, he's going to be picked up here by D6, but we'd like to throw that pass if we can. Now, if the pick really works well, R2 should be goal side. He should stop D5. R1 should come off uncovered. And this is basically what happens in our 4v series if we set a good pick and the switch doesn't work. And so D6 here is going to have to come out to the ball. And because R2 is goal side of D5, now we are going to be able to pass the ball through to the slipping player, and D5 should be trailing here. And so now as R2 receives this ball, D1 should slide. He can obviously shoot if he doesn't slide, but now we can get a two-pass look to L1. Now we're going to watch three separate clips and show some different things that can happen as we are coming off of these picks. In this first clip, we get a pretty good up pick and slip, and now as the ball carrier comes off, he draws the slide. Then he rolls back through the trail of the slipping player, which he has a little bit of space. He steps in and shoots. In this next clip, we get a really good up pick and slip. The ball carrier draws the player who is watching the pick. He passes to the slipping player. The slipping player finishes before the rotation can get there. In this final clip, we see an example of why we want a player on the back pipe. It wasn't purposeful, it wasn't meant to happen, but it does show why we want this player here. We get a decent field style pick. He's not goal side, but as he slips to the goal, he does get around the defenseman who has his eyes on the ball. The pass comes through to the slipping player. He doesn't catch it, but the player who is on the back pipe picks it up and shoots. Now, had this player received a pass, I'm betting he would have finished a little better. But as far as the clip goes, it really shows how we can be dangerous on our backside pipes. Now, another thing that may happen within this series is if D6 doesn't approach well, R1 can also try to turn the corner in and take a shot on goal if D6 doesn't do this well. So if you have some players who really like to dodge a slide, this is a great way to teach it, but it's also something where you should possibly see this look. Now that we see all of the kind of slipping looks, we're going to talk about the re-picking looks. So let's say that his R1 face dodges or spin moves off of this pick. He tries to turn the corner, but D6 does a really good job of sliding out to him and covering him as he comes down. Also, as R2 slips to the goal, which he has to do every time he's trying to set a repick, he gets D5 to chase, but he's not quite open and R1 doesn't hit him. So as D5 is chasing him in, that's the perfect time to come up and set another pick on the ball, because the player who's playing the ball probably doesn't think it's coming, and the player who is defending the slipper is chasing him and therefore definitely isn't expecting to have to switch to the ball. So as that happens, R1 is carrying down, and then R2 is going to step out and set a repick on D6 as R1 rolls back over the top. And so what we'd like to have happen here is D5, who should be watching the pick, should be in a position where he's now down in this area and is not able to step up really and get to R1 quickly. As this happens, R2 obviously has to slip to the goal, and now if he does slide up quickly, but the pick works well, we should be open with our slip here as well. And so within this set, now we're going to be looking for all of the down pick looks. You can now hit the nations look, which is basically a give and go to L2 and then back to the slipping player, and you can try to find those looks as well. So our first clip is going to be of our nations look after our down pick. So we get a pretty good up pick. Player slips, he comes back to repick, the ball is thrown across the floor, and now the other player passes to the slipping player who shoots. Now these next two clips are going to show a little bit of how we can just play plays out rather than having them be completely scripted. So we get an up pick and a turn away on the righty side, the ball is passed to the lefty side. We get an up pick on the lefty side. Nothing really happens, we roll away again. Now as the ball moves across the floor again, these players execute on a draw and dump rather than trying to pick again, which definitely works as far as playing it out and being realistic. But if you're really trying to focus in on the box elements, you're gonna want these players to utilize their picks rather than just hitting the ball movement, draw and dump stuff that we usually do in the field. In this third clip, we're gonna see how we can refuse a pick and kind of just talk about how we can play it out. As the clip starts, we get a good up pick, don't really get the down pick here, we pass it across pretty early, then we get a up pick, and because the players are expecting this up pick, the ball carrier carries upfield rather than down around the pick, which draws both defenders, leaving the player who is picking open. He passes down and that player shoots. It's important as you run through these drills, once players have a good understanding of how to run the offense, how to utilize the picks, that they don't just always do the exact same thing. We want them to read the play, we want them to be creative. If you're really focusing in on building the picks, maybe you have them work on the picks, but eventually we want the players to play for playing, utilizing the picks rather than always doing the same things. Once our offensive players have a decent understanding of the looks that they might find 4v3 and the defense has a great understanding of how they're going to rotate, we're going to move into our 4v4s. And so as we kind of outline the players, our offense is exactly the same, but our defense changes slightly. D1 is going to be on ball now, D3 will be left, D5 is going to be right, and D6 is going to be 2. D6 is 2 because if D5 does have to slide to the ball, he is now the second slide, and he should be covering his player as well as half of the other two players. Everybody should be doing that in a sense where D3 and D5 should be covering their player as well as half of L1 if he beats D1. But so now, as we're going through the 4v4s, our offense is going to have to set better picks to create the advantages that they found in the 4v3s. And our defense is going to be integrating their true pick defense, where they actually have two players that are at the pick, and now they can switch, they can try to get through. And the rotating is only going to come in if the switch or get through doesn't work, maybe we miscommunicate. So like we did in the 4v3s, we're going to go over what happens before the pick, and then go over all of the looks that could happen after the pick. So to start, L1 is going to pass the ball across to R1. D5 will step out to play him. And as that happens, L1 is going to cut the middle, trying to get ball side of D1. And D1 is going to be pushing him as he goes, but he's going to defend him as he gets in. He is going to also try to make sure that he is ball side. L2 is going to cycle to the top of the floor. D3 is going to cycle with him up. And like I mentioned in the 4v down pick video, if you want L1 to pick D3 in, you can also do that as you're repping through the drill. Now for our picking side, R1 is going to drag D5, and then R2 is going to come push his own man into the middle before stepping out to set an up pick on D5. So as he pushes D6 to the middle, this basically puts D6 at a disadvantage switching because he's not going to be in a good position on this side to step out to jump the pick. He'll be inside of the floor, which will make it easier for R1 to get open. As this is happening, D6 has to communicate to D5, hey, pick's coming right, and then D6 is going to be the one in the next set who's going to announce whether we switch, whether we stay with. D5 is not allowed to call the switch because he cannot see that someone is going to be able to take the ball carrier. And if no one's there, we're basically just giving up a good shot on net if the player who's on ball calls the switch. Whereas D6 can call the switch, he can see the whole play, and he knows that he can go to the ball. One of the rules that you can put in regarding picking within box as well as in field is we never switch on anything that doesn't actually have contact. So a player who's on ball needs to understand that he needs to stay with his player no matter what as long as there's no contact to him. It's almost something where you can get an automatic switch once your players learn to do it and learn to recognize when someone gets clipped on a pick. The biggest thing is that the players on ball need to know they have to stay with the ball carrier all the way through anything they can until they hear that switch call. Now that we are at our pick, we're going to go over the defensive look. So the best thing that can happen is we can get through this pick. So R1 makes his spin move, he comes off. D6 did a great job of communicating to D5 that the pick was coming, which allowed D5 to push R1 through the pick or step off around R2 and get back with him. And now there's no offensive advantage. You know, R1 could still beat D5 in this area, but the actual pick didn't cause an advantage, which for the most part, they definitely will. Now, the other thing that can happen if the pick works well is we can switch and switch effectively. So if R2's pick does work well and D5 can't get through, R1 comes off of this pick, D6 slides out to play him, and then R2 slips to the goal. We want D5 to get under R2 so that he can pick him up. And so as D6 is coming to the ball and he's telling D5, hey, pick coming right, if D5 steps off because they're not in good space, he should be able to get under him before he gets there if D6 gave him enough time. And so that's a really good way to try to switch almost before the pick even happens. In this clip, we see the easiest type of switch, and it's basically due to the fact that the player who sets the pick doesn't actually push off of the defenseman and he doesn't slip to the goal, which easily allows the player coming to the pick to switch to the ball carrier and the player who got picked to recover in and play the player who was picking. Now, if this pick does work well, we're going to see basically everything from the 4v3 series. So if R2 sets a really good pick here and D6 has to step out to play, now we definitely have our slipping player who is open. And so if the ball is passed through to him, now we're going to have to rotate with either D1 or D3. We'd like for it to be D3, even though he was just moving upfield with this cycle. It'll most likely be D1, but we'd like D3 because L2 is less dangerous than L1, but we may be able to surprise him on his slip. In this clip, I want you to focus on the player who is backside up top. Notice how as the other side is running their up pick and eventually their down pick, he spiders in, gets to the middle of the field so that he is able to slide if anything comes of the picks. In this clip, we see a great example of the lower backside defenseman sliding up to a slipping player who was about to catch the ball. Notice how because he was prepared and he was sloughed in, he can easily surprise this slipping player as he slides. So the next way that the pick might work well is if D6 cannot get to the switch. And so maybe he doesn't communicate well, maybe R2 did such a good job of pushing him inside that he can't get there, but if R1 comes off of this pick and D6 does not pick him up, obviously we're going to have to rotate, and because he's coming through on this downward angle, most likely it'll be D1 to go to him, and D3 will have to get down. Now, as this happened, we obviously have a slip here. D6 should be covering him since he didn't go to the ball, but D5 or D6 is going to end up having to rotate up to L2, but should just get into the middle to go play him since the ball is going to be on this side. In this clip, the offense creates an advantage by dodging the slipping player, and we see how our backside players are going to slide. We don't do a very good job of communicating who is going to go and who is going to split the two players backside. What we'd like to have happen is we'd like for the player who is higher to slide so we don't give up the easy dump to the backside pipe, which they try to find but miss. Basically, if the offense causes the advantage and we have to slide, we're going to use all of the same techniques that we had to use in our 4v3 series as far as rotating within this set, because once this pick works, essentially we are now 4v3. So now that we understand the defensive side, we're going to go over the offensive side. And so obviously we would like for this pick to work. And so the first thing that can happen is as R1 is coming off of this pick, the slide does not happen, and therefore R1 can come in and try to take his shot. If he does take his shot, that's awesome, but we might get a slide from D1, and if that happens, we really want to make sure L1 is on this back pipe so the pass can come through and then he can finish. In this clip, we get a pretty bad up pick. There was no contact made, but the ball carrier comes off and tries to dodge the switching player. And now as he continues to dodge, he does draw the backside low defenseman, leaving the player wide open on the backside pipe. He feeds him and the player takes a good shot. We definitely like having as many of these types of looks as we can. One of the things about picking, especially in box and especially in watching a lot of the teams play, is that a lot of players really hesitate to come off the pick and shoot, basically because all of the coaches are really trying to hit that slip player and they beat it into them because it's the more difficult thing to do. But if a player comes off a pick and is open or has a good shot and can shoot over a pick, they absolutely need to know that they can score in this manner. In this first example, we get a nice up pick, which frees the ball carrier. The ball carrier sees that the player who's switching to him is pretty wide and face dodges past the switching player, gets in on net, and gets a good shot off. So now the next thing that might happen is as he comes off of this pick, the switch does work and R2 reads it really well. He also sets a good goal side pick and now he slips to the goal, and because he is goal side of D5, R1 can throw maybe a lever pass, a shovel pass into R2, and now R2 can shoot. He might get a slide, but then he can also pass to L1. The thing about this is that if D1 slides to this early, R2's got to catch it, see the slide coming, dump it over his shoulder, and then L1 is going to be here on the back pipe, and we might be able to find that look as well. Now our final set of looks is going to come out of our repicks. So let's say we have a really good first pick. R1 maybe throws a fake in towards R2 because he wants to try to keep D6 away. It doesn't really work. R2 slips to the goal. D5 is trailing him. And now R1 continues his carry down. D6 stays with him. And now R2 steps back outside to set a pick on D6. And R1 is going to come back up over the top. Now, once again, within this, R2 has to slip to the goal. He's got to get D5 to try to chase him. And as he's chasing him, hopefully D5 tries to get back through in and under him, which means that as he sets this second pick, he's not going to be in a good position to switch, and R1 can take a step over him, or if he does switch effectively, now hopefully D6 wasn't ready for this pick, and we can slip with R2 to the goal. And so all of the looks that are in our down pick video will be what can come out of this. Once again, as we went through this, these are all of the kind of looks that can happen. So any one of them can happen as we are picking here, picking there, but it really is a fast moving drill where we're gonna have a pick on one side, pick on the other side. In the 4v3s, it may be pretty quick because you're gonna be able to find the looks pretty easily, but then in the 4v4s, it shouldn't happen quite as often. Even though if your team knows how to set good picks, how to occupy defensemen so that they get picked easily, you can really find a lot of easy looks within our 4v4s and hopefully eventually our 5-on-5 complete sets. So this is our final clip in the video, and it just shows again how we can refuse the pick. As the player comes to set the up pick, the ball carrier comes over the pick rather than trying to go under it, surprising the defensive players who think that he's going to go under, gets to the middle of the field, shoots, and scores. I hope that you enjoyed this video of the 4v up pick and cycle progression. Hopefully you can use this within your box practices coming up this winter. If you did like the video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and share with any coach who may be able to use it. Also, if you want to download the drill PDF, you can get that at patreon.com/POWLAX. It'll be a part of the $1 per month drill tier. I'll put a link right up here in the corner as well as down in the description. In the next couple weeks, we're going to have a few more box videos. We're going to have a couple different box offenses that are really going to rely on these to build the picking motions. Then we're going to have a couple more man up plays, and then we're going to go in depth into how to use transition, what to be aware of, and that should almost conclude our box series, and then we'll get to more field stuff. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one.